2 months after he was ousted from his speakership position because there were Republicans who were unhappy with him working with Democrats on a temporary government funding bill, an issue that's still very much alive at this point in time. And the Republican congressman, a bigger impact about him leaving is the fact that Republican slim majority is now even slimmer. Remember, just last week, former Republican Congressman George Santos was ousted, was expelled. So that means that Republicans are now dealing with an even slimmer majority, considering they started with the slim one to begin with. But I guess the good news here for Republicans is that it's unlikely that this loss from McCarthy's seat will be permanent, because he does come from such a bright red district that a Republican is expected to fill that seat. But Steve, the reality is that it will take a few months for them to fill that slot after the California governor calls for a special election.
And so, Melina, over in the Senate now, Republicans are drawing a line on Ukraine aid, demanding policies at the border be addressed first. So what are Republicans actually demanding here, and is there a possibility for any breakthrough?
Well, look, Steve, it seems like Republicans feel like there's a real possibility for them to make some headway on border security here, if that is the case, that they're able to get enough Democrats to compromise on the issue. And look, the reality is the fact that the White House has expressed how urgent this situation is, saying that by the end of this year, they will run out of money to support Ukraine. President Biden today emphasizing the urgency of this issue, saying that he's willing to make significant compromises on the border if it means getting some Republican votes to get that Ukraine aid across the finish line. But the question here, Steve, is how far is he and Senate Democrats willing to go on the border issue? Republicans are making demands from anything such as asylum reform to trying to reinstate a Trump-era policy known as Remain in Mexico, which is a policy that President Biden was quick to overturn when he took his position at the White House. So the question is, how far are Senate Democrats and the White House willing to go here? Here's what some Republicans told me heading into tonight's vote, where they're expected to block debate on this supplemental funding request.
Look, I'm someone who's been a strong supporter of military aid for Ukraine, but we have to secure our own border. And by the way, a lot of Senate Democrats, you should ask them, are in agreement on this.
They have a base problem that makes it difficult for Chuck Schumer to do anything on the border. So if we feel like, as a minority party in the Senate, we have a little bit of leverage because they really want the other stuff.
Now, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer did try to shore up more Republican support for this bill by allowing them the opportunity to make amendments to it to address their border concerns. But from what we heard from Senate Republicans, as well as the Senate Minority Leader, Republicans are just not willing to go for that offer. So they're going to continue to hash this out and try to come to some sort of compromise on border security in exchange for Ukraine aid. Now, in other news, but also related to Ukraine, Steve, for the first time today, the DOJ did invoke their war crime law, allowing them to charge 4 Russian military officials who had been accused of torturing an American that's living in Ukraine. Steve?
And today's Melina Wisecup reporting for us live from Capitol Hill. Melina, thank you. And joining us now to offer his thoughts on the fight over President Biden's funding proposal for Ukraine, we have Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri. Senator Eric Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Senator, as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, we really want to get your insights here. Where would you say are the biggest points of contention between Senate Republicans and Democrats with regard to this $106 billion foreign aid package to Israel and Ukraine?
Well, it's kind of a mess. Joe Biden sent over, a bunch of issues bundled into one supplemental bill. I support, as I do with the appropriations bill, dealing with these issues one by one, because I think, as relates to Israel or Ukraine, there's different political support, there's different realities on the ground, there's different likelihoods of success, and we ought to treat them like that. But they're all lumped together. I would say that that's one piece. The other problem is that, we just got the text of 160 some odd page bill yesterday, which is what's wrong with Washington to kind of try to handle these things like that in a shotgun fashion. And then thirdly, the Democrats are just not serious on the border. I would say that's probably the biggest separation. They have no desire to deal with the 10,000 people a day we're seeing crossing the border. We've seen over 8 million people here come illegally. We're anticipating more next year. It's a real crisis at the border, and they're not serious about it. And unless and until the Democrats want to deal with the border, I just don't see this thing moving anywhere, and it's probably going to go down today on a procedural vote.
Senator, to your point, FBI Director Christopher Wray yesterday testifying on Capitol Hill that we're at probably one of the most dangerous points in history, with multiple threats at a time that every threat is heightened. So do you see that as an opportunity for Democrats to sort of coalesce around Republican border policy?
You know, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, because Joe Biden's policy since day one is to have an open southern border. All the things that were working under President Trump, whether it was remain in Mexico, if you were seeking asylum, you had to wait in Mexico until you had your asylum hearing. And by the way, 9 out of 10 of those are bogus, but that was the process that was working. Title 42 was working. Having an administration under President Trump that was interested in securing the border, it was all working. That changed literally on day one of the Biden administration. So, you know, I'm a little skeptical, even if there is language that's helpful, and I'm for the strongest border policy we can possibly have. I'm a Senate sponsor of the House or the Senate version of sort of HR2. But even if you have that language, you have to have a president, an executive branch that's interested in executing the law. And Joe Biden's shown no desire to do it, and Senate Democrats aren't interested in negotiating on either, evidently.
Senator Schmidt, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, yesterday, a civil rights official at the Department of Justice testifying on the Hill, Kristen Clark, she was asked about the facts around the situation Missouri versus Biden, which you were, by the way, instrumental with when you were AG of the state of Missouri. Let me play the sound for you and get your reaction.
Is any criminal investigation or prosecution of the persons responsible for that activity in the FBI, CISA, and at the White House and their co-conspirators underway in the Civil Rights Division?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with this litigation, but happy to bring your question back.
In your expert opinion, is that an acceptable answer from the Assistant Attorney General of the United States?
No, it's insane. It's totally insane. I mean, this was the largest censorship enterprise in the history of the United States, executed by Joe Biden with his big tech partners. We exposed it when I was AG as Missouri versus Biden. This is a huge case in front of the Supreme Court. The idea that the director of the Civil Rights Division doesn't know about these First Amendment abuses is unbelievable. But it could have just been her shaking that question off so she didn't have to answer it. I don't really know, but it's embarrassing for her, and it's embarrassing for the Justice Department.
Senator Eric Schmidt, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Anytime.
President Biden, who's been campaigning on the platform that he's uniquely positioned to beat former President Trump, is now saying he might not be the only one. That's as Trump's taking aim at Biden and skipping tonight's 4th GOP debate. And today's Iris Tao brings us more from the White House.
President Biden today saying he's not the only Democrat who could beat former President Trump, but he is sounding confident about himself.
President, do you think there is any Democrat who could defeat Donald Trump other than you?
Probably 50 of them.
You do believe that there are?
I'm not the only one to defeat him, but I will defeat him.
And this comes after surprisingly stark comments from President Biden on Tuesday night when he told donors that he's not sure if he's going to be in the race if Trump wasn't in the race as well. Biden's campaign then trying to downplay that by saying that Biden has always called Trump a threat to democracy. And Biden himself similarly also tried to walk it back by saying this later on Tuesday night. Watch.
Would you be running for president if Trump wasn't running?
I expect so, but look, he is running, and I have to run.
Would you drop out if Trump runs out?
No, not now.
And on the other side, Trump also taking aim at Biden, saying on Tuesday that he doesn't believe Biden will become the next Democratic nominee.
I personally don't think he makes it physically.
Recent polls have seen a close matchup between Trump and Biden, while the New York Times poll last month showed Trump slightly ahead in battleground states. That's as a new CNN poll released today shows that Biden's drop approval rating has dropped to 37% amid economic worries. That's almost the worst number he's gotten since taking office. And as President Biden takes on a fundraising sprint this week, Trump will again skip the GOP presidential debate tonight and instead hold a private fundraiser in Florida. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao at TD News.
As the Iowa caucuses approach, some Democrats coming out with a new narrative about former President Trump, saying if reelected, Trump will be a dictator in his second term and abuse government powers. Joining us now to assess, We have Paul Dans, former chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management under Trump and director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project at the Heritage Foundation. Paul Dans, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Paul, on the eve of the Iowa caucuses, the new narrative from Democrats appears to be, and some Republicans and conservatives like Liz Cheney, is that in his second term, President Trump would be a dictator and that he would be more dangerous than they perceive him to be in 2016. Keeping in mind, Biden's DOJ has indicted President Trump, alleging he's committed crimes related to having classified documents, the January 6th riots, election interference, and so forth. So is there some fear that Trump will be acquitted in the 4 criminal trials and ultimately win the presidency here?
Well, fear, I don't know if there's a fear of it, maybe on behalf of liberals. The point, we don't speak obviously for President Trump, but at Heritage, we do speak on behalf of conservatives across the country. And, you know, whatever they're weaponizing at President Trump is really ultimately weaponized at us. So this narrative, you know, is not just directed at President Trump, it's directed at any God-fearing, you know, American-loving conservative that's really going to be in their crosshairs. That DOJ, we know the FBI has set its mark on essentially half of the electorate, claiming that, you know, in some cases that Christian conservatives and others are the biggest domestic threat facing America. So it's really an absurd reality, but if there's a dictator, to be sure, he's occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now.
Paul, there's some sound from last night's town hall in Iowa that's been picking up quite a bit of traction. President Trump was asked if he planned to abuse power or make himself a dictator. Here's how he responded.
To be clear, do you in any way have any plans whatsoever, if reelected president, to abuse power, to break the law, to use the government to go after people?
You mean like they're using right now? So, in the history of our country, what's happened to us, again, has never happened before, except for day one.
Except what?
He's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's not retribution.
Paul, MSNBC said he never answered the question. CNN accused him of sidestepping the question. What do you think of this new dictator narrative and President Trump's response?
Well, he's exactly right. The dictator, like I said, is here in Washington right now. We've never seen a government purposed against a candidate like President Trump or an entire movement like the conservatives. So, you know, when he facetiously says dictator, he's pointing at the fact that this government, as it stands, is not a government of the people. It's a permanent government in Washington, and they resent people like Donald Trump who are threatening to upturn the apple cart and return the power from Washington back to the people. You know, when we have no action on the border, when we're suffering through an energy crisis sitting on top of the greatest wealth of energy probably worldwide, there is someone to blame for that, and it's not going to be Donald Trump or conservatives. It's the people who are directing this criticism at him.
Paul Dans, thank you so much for joining us. And up next, is it too late to save the United States economy? Lawmakers today investigating America's debt. Experts say we'll have to take drastic steps in order to avoid a default in the near future. And China's human rights violations extending beyond its borders. Lawmakers today sounding the alarm on CCP repression across the globe. That and more when we return.
Do you feel the bills getting higher and higher every time you check out at the supermarket? Do you feel your monthly discretionary money has decreased, although your income increases yearly? Inflation is eating away at your wealth. Digital wallets and central bank digital currencies are destroying financial privatization. Only gold and silver are constitutional forms of money. Our privacy was to be protected against unlawful search and seizure. Midas Gold Group will help you take control of your finances and protect your wealth and your privacy. Pulling money out of the corrupt banking and investment system is a way to privatize your finances as the elite push us towards digital wallets and central bank digital currency. Protect your wealth with real money. Deal with the best. Midas Gold Group, a proud America First company. MidasGoldGroup.com.
I'd like to say this is the first time, but there have been others.
How many?
Who can keep track?
You think this is a joke?
Darling, we need answers, and you're gonna give them to us.
Tell us again.
My car broke down. I brought it here.
I got stuck paying an expensive repair bill.
So it's true.
How much, darling?
$2,300.
$2,300.
Well, what was I supposed to do? My transmission was shot.
You pick up your phone and you call CarShield before the car breaks down.
Plans through CarShield cover up to 5,000 parts and systems in your car.
That's right. A plan through CarShield could save you on some criminally high auto repairs, especially if your car is out of warranty. So, call CarShield, America's #1 auto protection company, before a breakdown and save yourself from getting stuck in car repair jail.
Let me guess. You hate saving money.
Who hates saving money?
Apparently you do.
All you had to do was call CarShield. And you could have protected yourself against expensive repairs.
Yeah, and then my price will go up the minute I file a claim.
Shut up! CarShield has the price locked in.
For as long as you cover your car.
I guess I should have called CarShield?
It's about time you said something that made sense.
Now you know what you need to do next time.
Bet he'll call CarShield now.
So can I go? Or
Don't get handcuffed paying expensive auto repairs. Call now and get the CarShield guarantee. Your price will never go up and your coverage will never go down as long as you cover your car. In just minutes, you could have a plan that covers up to 5,000 parts and systems in your car. Don't wait until it's too late. Get CarShield's best coverage yet. Call 800-965-0729. 800-965-0729. 800-965-0729.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance. House lawmakers today investigating the federal debt and how it affects the American people. This as the U.S. is dealing with record high national debt. Democrats at the hearing mostly blaming GOP tax cuts for this, saying that's how the U.S. lost revenue. Meanwhile, Republicans putting blame on increased government spending. Here's what one of the witnesses said on the issue.
The blame game doesn't accomplish anything. It really doesn't tell us where to go from here forward. Even if I believed it was 100% due to tax cuts or 100% due to spending increases, the world today is completely different. It doesn't tell us the next best step. And debt crises are the most serious of economic crises because they lower the government's ability to pay while also increasing costs.
Kent Smetters is a professor of business economics at the University of Pennsylvania. He said that calculations show the U.S. will default on its debt within the next 20 years, and that creating fiscal balance at this point would require drastic steps, such as either an immediate increase of 40% on all federal taxes or an immediate decrease in all government spending by 30%. He later said that a possible solution would be a combination of the two, decrease spending while increasing revenue. And another possible solution the House is considering to deal with the debt crisis, the creation of a bipartisan fiscal commission to review spending. This as a majority of Americans say the nation's $33 trillion deficit is a top priority. To assess, we had a chance to speak with Brandon Arnold, the executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon Arnold, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, Brandon, the national debt, $33.17 trillion, according to the U.S. Treasury. A Pew Research poll earlier this year found that 57% of Americans say that Washington's top priority should be reducing the deficit. That number seems to cross partisan lines. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely right. Our debt is out of control. We're starting to see payments on our national debt exceed popular programs, things like Medicaid, veterans benefits. This is just going to service the national debt. It's not providing any benefit to taxpayers whatsoever. We absolutely need to get this problem under control. Unfortunately, Congress has been completely unwilling to do so. They've been totally asleep at the switch. And meanwhile, taxpayers are paying a larger and larger burden when it comes to our national debt. It's really unfair.
Last week, we did see that the House Budget Committee at least discussed the idea of creating a bipartisan bicameral fiscal commission, which Speaker Mike Johnson supports. Do you think such a fiscal commission will hold lawmakers accountable to vote for legislation that will ultimately increase revenue and make meaningful cuts to their runaway spending?
Yeah, let's hope we get a fiscal commission. Let's hope we get a fiscal commission in the first place, but let's hope we get one that actually works, because this could easily be a fig leaf for politicians that want to pretend like they care about our national debt. But if they create a fiscal commission that has no teeth to it, that has no ability to fast track whatever proposal they put together to the floor of the House and the Senate to force these politicians to vote on this, that could be problematic. We need to create a fiscal commission that actually works. We've learned our lessons in the past from the super committee, from other failed initiatives, and it's time to put a fiscal commission into practice that has all spending on the table. Social Security, Medicare, domestic programs, you name it. They have to be on the table. That doesn't mean they're all going to get cut, but we have to take a holistic look at our federal budget and find out what is working and what is not, and start doing something about it.
Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Chinese Communist Party's tentacles reaching within and beyond its borders. Several senators today warning of an alarming rise in China's transnational repression across the globe. NTD's Sam Wong brings us more.
On Wednesday, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee warned of an alarming rise in transnational repression across the globe, and one of the major perpetrators, the Chinese Communist Party.
This hearing illustrates the long tentacles of authoritarian regimes like the CCP, and that it knows no borders.
According to Freedom House, China currently runs the world's most sophisticated and comprehensive transnational repression campaign. Between 2014 and 2021, the nonprofit documented more than 200 physical attacks carried out at the direction of the CCP, far exceeding any other authoritarian regime. And the targets of those actions include ethnic and religious minorities, dissidents, human rights activists, journalists, and many others.
It should surprise no one that China is leading the world in using transnational repression to quash any sign of dissent.
Just weeks ago, a group of activists were physically assaulted in San Francisco during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit while protesting human rights violations by Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party.
Aside from physical attacks, the CCP has reportedly engaged in forced rendition of asylum seekers, threatening family members back home, and co-opting foreign officials. Just this year, U.S. authorities arrested 2 Chinese suspects in connection with a CCP-backed operation against practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual group heavily persecuted in China. The 2 were accused of bribing an IRS agent to revoke the tax-exempt status of a Falun Gong-affiliated organization.
There is a dictator's playbook, and mechanisms which are used, which are effective in transnational repression, are inevitably going to be spreading and used by others.
Witnesses on the panel urged lawmakers to treat China's transnational repression as a high priority. Sam Wong, NTD News.
And that is all we have for you this evening on the Capitol Report. Thank you for watching. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance. Have a nice evening. See you back here tomorrow.